Hey, are you ready to turn your podcast into an authority engine and not just more content? Well, welcome to Influential Voices of Authority. This is the podcast for coaches, consultants, and experts who are ready to stop being the best kept secret in their niche and move to being that recognized, sought after authority. I'm your host, Erik K. Johnson, podcast talent coach and media veteran. In this episode and every episode, we sit down with industry leaders who are visibility experts. They're experts at getting you seen in front of the right crowd at the right time with the right message. And we uncover how they use their voice, their message, and their platform to build trust, to grow their audience, and to attract premium clients. If you're ready to turn your voice into your greatest asset, then you're in the right place. Welcome to Influential Voices of Authority. You know, one of the biggest lies that experts believe, they tell themselves every day, is that if I just give people enough information and value, they'll finally change. And unfortunately, that's untrue. They're not going to change. Information and what you believe to be value isn't creating transformation. People are starving not for information, but for connection. They don't want more information. Information doesn't create transformation. Connection and implementation does. Not only are they starving for connection, they're starving for belief. They want to believe that it can be done. They want to believe that they can do it. They're starving for someone who understands what it feels like to be stuck. And I know that you know what that's like because you've gone through that journey. That's what you need to share with them. Not your 6 steps to success, but that I've been there, done that, understand you, I see you, and I can help you get out of that. That's exactly why today's conversation here on the episode with Jenn Trepeck is so important, and why her podcast, Salad with a Side of Fries, is such a great example of why this matters and how it can be effective. Jenn has built authority in the health and wellness space that is so crowded and noisy. And it's the way she's done it is amazing. It cuts through all the noise. And she's done it by not by screaming louder, not by posting more tips, not by trying to go viral, but she's built her authority by helping people feel seen. And that's the whole lesson in today's episode and in this great interview with Jenn, because authority is not built when people admire your expertise or believe that you know more than anybody else. Authority is built when people feel understood by you, when they've gone through the challenges and they can see that you've gone through those challenges as well, or that you understand what it's like to go through those challenges. There's a huge difference between knowing the information and knowing what it's like to be stuck. Anybody can Google nutritional advice. Anyone can go ask AI, ChatGPT, Claude for workout plans, and it can generate it in a heartbeat. Anybody can go find another expert on YouTube giving 5 steps to lose weight or 3 habits for better health. But people don't follow experts. They don't follow experts in the niche, because information alone doesn't create the transformation. There's information out there everywhere. I was listening to a podcast earlier today, and they said if books and information made us rich, we would spend all of our time in a library. And last time I was at a library, I didn't see any librarian driving away in a Lamborghini. Information alone doesn't do it for you. People aren't following information or experts because of information alone. They follow the people who tell the story that make them believe that change is actually possible for them. If you want to be a magnetic leader, tell people the story that makes them believe it's possible. That's why podcasts are so powerful. That's why I love podcasting, because you're allowed to share your story and make others believe. A podcast gives your audience something that social media can't. It gives your listener depth because you're spending time with them having a conversation. It gives them nuance and emotion and humanity and empathy. People hear your voice every week and they're making that connection with you. They hear your struggles that you've gone through. They hear your stories and your perspective when you create your content the right way with the right context. And then over time, you stop becoming content, you stop becoming the expert, you start becoming trusted. You start becoming a friend. You start building that relationship. And that's what Jenn has done so brilliantly on her show. I mean, the title alone says it all. Salad with a side of fries. Like, it's telling you, it immediately tells you this isn't like any other podcast. It isn't some rigid, shame-filled wellness brand with 6 steps to losing weight. This is something different. It tells you that there's a little balance. Salad, side of fries. There's permission. There's humanity. There's understanding. She has a brand that creates an emotional connection with her audience before she even ever says a word, just the title of her show alone. And that's what so many experts miss. Your authority is not built by proving to your audience how smart you are. It's built by creating emotional safety so they can be themselves and believe that success is possible for them. People change when they feel safe enough to believe they can. And that's your job as the host of your show, is to make people believe it's possible for them. Your podcast is one of your greatest tools, one of the greatest tools that you have to create that trust at scale in every episode with the audience that you reach. Because most podcasters, they go out and they waste that opportunity. They spend too much time focused on their content and their information and their super steps to success. Their podcast turns their show into a lecture. It becomes a TED Talk. It's an information dump. Very few TED Talks are memorable. Very few TED Talks are ones that people talk about over and over and over again. And those that are the ones that share amazing story. When you can go out and, like Simon Sinek's TED Talk shared story and people remember it. But when it's a TED Talk that's just information, they wonder why nobody buys. When it's a podcast that's just full of information and they're like, my podcast isn't doing anything to attract my ideal listener, my ideal client. Well, because information creates awareness. That's nice, but it's not creating any buyers. It's the connection that creates action. I mean, just think about the people that you trust online. Think of somebody that you follow online. Anybody. And it's not because they gave you the best bullet points. That's not making you trust them. It's not because they gave you the most powerful 6 steps to success. It's because you feel like you know them. You have a relationship with them. If you follow Russell Brunson at ClickFunnels, you know his whole wrestling story and how he wrestled in college and how he built his potato gun. If you follow Alex Hormozy, you know his whole gym launch story and how he met his wife. If you follow Oprah, you know her whole weight loss challenge struggle journey. If you follow Taylor Swift, you know her story about Travis Kelce. That has nothing to do with her music. It goes on and on and on. Anybody that you trust, you know their story. You trust their heart. You trust their intentions. You trust their perspective. Not by the content or the information they're giving you, but by the context they're wrapping around it. It's not the perfectly organized framework that's building trust. And ironically, the more polished and the more expert sounding people try to become, the less relatable they feel. People don't trust perfect. People want you as who you really are. The less human you feel, the less you're trusted. And when you do that, the less people come into your world. Your audience doesn't need another perfect expert. They need a guide. They need somebody that can take their hand and show them the way. They need someone that can say, I understand where you are because I've been there too. I've been there, done that, got the t-shirt, understand how to get out of it. That's influence. That's true authority. And in the world we are in today, where AI can generate information, infinite information in a heartbeat, Your humanity becomes your greatest competitive advantage. It is what will set you apart from everyone else in your niche because nobody else can be you. Nobody else can tell your story or have your voice or have your perspective or have your opinion or have your energy. The only part that AI can replicate is your information. But your humanity, that's the part nobody can replicate. And when you lean into that on your podcast, you stop creating content people consume and you start creating conversations that people remember. And that is when your listeners become clients. That's when your audience starts sharing your show with others. That's when you become remarkable because you're doing something worth remarking about. That's when your voice becomes magnetic. Not because you taught more or taught better or you knew more than anybody else, but because people felt something when they listened to your show. And that's why I've invited Jenn Trepeck on the show today. She is a force of nature in the wellness space. She is a health and lifestyle coach. She's an entrepreneur. She has written a book. She's the author of The Uncomplicating Wellness. She's the host of an award-winning podcast, Salad with a Side of Fries. She was even named to Podcast Magazine's 40 Under 40. She's amazing. She's going to share with you today how she has used her podcast to grow her influence and authority in the incredibly noisy health and wellness space. It's an amazing conversation. I trust you will enjoy it. Here is my talk with Jenn Trepeck. Hey, Jenn, it's great to see you. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks, Erik. I'm excited for our conversation.
Oh, I am as well, because you've done so much in the podcasting world to grow your influence and authority. It's been absolutely fantastic. You've won multiple podcast awards, probably far too many than I can recount here on the episode. One of the ones that impressed me was Podcast Magazine's 40 Under 40. Tell me how you use your podcast to grow your authority in your niche.
Yeah, so that was a few years ago when I was still under 40. So, like I got in there just underneath. It was magical. Really, it's interesting because I don't know if you've read the book, The Death of Expertise.
Oh, no, I haven't. Who wrote that?
Oh, I'll have to look it up.
Okay.
I'll look it up.
Death of Expertise. Okay.
Yeah, here. You want me to find it? You can.
Yeah, let's
All right, hold
I
on.
always love a good book. I just Audible had a crazy deal, and I think I bought like 10 books on Audible the other day because I always love a good book, especially on business. So
It's The Death of Expertise by Tom Nichols.
Tom Nichols. Okay, cool.
Yes.
I'll put a link to that in the show notes as well.
And fundamentally, it's that people are sick of the experts. They're sick of the people who stand up on this pedestal, right? And especially in my space, we almost think of it as, there's healthcare 1.0, 2.0, and 3.0, and we can sort of go through that if you want to. But 1.0 was think of the old days in a small town where there was like one doctor who treated everyone for everything, and the doctor knew your great-great-grandparents who you never met, right? Like, they knew everything. And then healthcare 2.0 was all of the electronic medical records, and everybody is a specialist, and you need 85 different doctors to figure out what's going on with you, all of that. And I think, in my opinion, the death of expertise kind of connects to that, where people are frustrated by the system around them that's saying, you're the problem, everybody else has the answer but you, and everybody's talking from their pedestals. And so one of the things for me with Salad with a Side of Fries is that it allowed people to understand my approach, to see me not as another expert who's sitting on this pedestal telling them everything they're doing wrong, but saying, look, this isn't easy. And you're not wrong and you're not failing. And all of the things you're experiencing are exactly what we would expect based on X, Y, and Z. So if we know that, then we can do something about it. And so it's ironic that something that can help us sort of take us off that pedestal in one aspect actually creates the authority of trust that we're looking for. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. So the podcast allows you to display your authority and your expertise, but also your humanity and your flaws so that you build that relationship and you build that trust.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's fantastic. I love that perspective. Tell me about the day that you launched the podcast and what kind of emotions you were going through and what that was like for you.
It's funny. So I, I built my health and lifestyle coaching practice on the side of a full-time job for almost 12 years. I left my full-time job and launched the podcast more because I was sort of like, I don't know what to do with free time. And I'd gotten into listening to podcasts. And I thought, I'm going to try this. I went into it with the feeling of we're going to throw a noodle at the wall and see what happens, see what sticks. So I went into the launch with a lot of excitement, but not a lot of expectations.
Did you already have the coaching practice launched at this
Yes.
time? Okay.
Oh, yes. I was 12 years into coaching.
Holy cow. All right.
Yeah. So 12 years as a side hustle, but 12 years, almost 12
Sure.
years.
Yeah.
And so the interesting thing in that regard, too, was that I had all the content. I've been having these conversations as a coach for 12 years and as a lifetime as a human, you know, I just had to learn the medium of the podcast.
So where were you
And so
sharing your content prior to the podcast?
just with clients and one-on-one, my practice was 100% referrals, a
Oh,
little bit of
wow.
networking, but even that was 100% referrals. Yeah.
Okay. So you're going into it not high expectations. Let's just kind of see what happens.
And even with that, I didn't really share a ton of that work or even my story on social media until I launched the podcast. And so it really wasn't this massive public facing thing until the podcast, even the podcast had some legs and like took off on its own a bit. You know, I went into it thinking, we'll see what happens. If it's a total bust, we'll let it go. And onward. But it really it took on a life of its own. It resonated with people and I enjoyed it. And that's really, I think, what helped propel it forward.
So you record that first episode and you hit publish. Like, when did you get the feeling that, wow, look at that, people are actually listening, this might be something?
I can't remember. Even the first episode had more downloads than I expected.
Oh, wow.
And I remember as I kept hitting, even in the first couple episodes, like these thousands of downloads. And I was like, well, I know I'm like texting people I know to be like, hey, will you listen? You know, like I launched this thing. But I was like, I have not reached out to that many people. And one of my mentors in the podcasting space used to say, no matter how many downloads you have, like look at that number and then think about a venue with that many seats. So a venue with 1,000 seats, 10,000 seats. You know, I went to the University of Michigan. The Michigan, you know, the big house, our football stadium has over 100,000 seats. And I remember having this moment after passing that milestone and thinking, that's like me standing in the middle of the big house talking to people. Like, when have you ever spoken to that many people? And not necessarily every single one is a unique listen or listener, but it didn't matter. It was this piece of going, wait a minute, people are interested and they're showing up and continuing to show up. And it was like a bit of awe. And then also feeling that responsibility of continuing to show up for the people who are continuing to show up for me.
How did you get it to spread? How did those people start sharing it with each other?
I wish I knew the answer entirely. I think that's part of the downside of podcasting. I did a lot of podcast guesting, right?
Okay.
Like we're doing
You were
now.
on other shows. Okay.
Yes. I started doing social media,
When you
and kind of
say
talking
when
about
you
it.
say a lot of podcast guesting, what does that mean?
Yes.
Like, what do you consider a lot?
So we can't always control the acceptance rate.
Mhm.
All we can control is the pitch rate, right?
Yeah.
So, and to some degree, this is a numbers game. And now there's certainly strategy and skill involved in that pitching. But since the beginning, I've pitched anywhere from two to 10 podcasts a week to be a guest on their shows. So you can do the math if you want to say, 10% return, or a 2% return. It becomes a function of, the more skilled, the more strategic we are in choosing those shows, writing that pitch and those kinds of things, we can get more and more of them, that you can increase that response rate or that acceptance rate. But created systems in my business, in my practice as a whole, to ensure that those pitches were going out consistently to this day.
How long were you doing 2 to 10? How long have you been doing that kind of pitch rate?
So I launched the show August of 2019. Since then, I mean, when I was doing it on my own, it was closer to like a couple a week,
Okay.
and then I have people who work for me who, I work with them every week on who we're pitching and what we're pitching and all of that stuff. But, and then depending on the size of that team, we're at somewhere 2 to 10 every week since then. So almost 7 years.
Wow. That's impressive.
Yeah.
What does your pitch look like when you send it? I get so many pitches that say, "Hey, Bob Smith would make a great guest for your show," and they know nothing about my show other than the fact
Exactly.
that Jenn Trepeck was on your show, and I think I should be on your show too. Well, how do you pitch?
Yeah. This is a course, to some degree. And um, one of the fundamental pieces, and I receive also all of those terrible pitches like you do. So one of the interesting things is also to see even the pitches that people are paying for. I'm like, you paid someone to send me this? Like, yikes. So fundamentally, one of the biggest things is demonstrating that you understand what their show is about, you understand who they're talking to, and you pitch them something, you do their work for them in, here's the episode, I think the topic we could talk about. As I explain the topic, I'm basically giving you the questions to ask me if you want to do that. And here's what your audience could take away from this, from a conversation on this, topic. The majority of the poor pitches do not demonstrate that they have listened, do not demonstrate that they understand what my show is about, do not demonstrate that they understand who the audience is or how to add value to that. It doesn't have to be, I think another thing in terms of choosing the show, it doesn't have to be a show that talks about exactly the same things you do. It's about who their audience is to then say, we talk to the same people. And I can frame this in a way that fits the frame of your show. So I could end up on a dating podcast. I could end up on a, entrepreneurship podcast. I can end up on a, more of a personal memoir kind of podcast, right? Like we can end up having these conversations from different angles or covering different things. I can end up in parenting podcasts. And it continues to grow as the audience because we want to understand the Venn diagram of who listens and then how we serve that audience. So we might be aligned in the people that we serve. We can create a conversation together that makes sense. I get a lot of pitches about people who all want to talk about the same thing. I get a lot of pitches where it's very clear they're not a fit for my show at all. Um, or it, uh, they just end up giving the same, like there are a bunch that don't even mention the name of my show. It is a generic copy paste email. My favorite are the ones where they just BCC a whole host of people, and send the messages.
Yeah, I've gotten a ton of those as well. I love the concept of finding people who are already speaking to the audience you want to reach. Because
Yes.
if we're doing a business podcast, we think we have to be on other business podcasts as if the listeners only listen to business podcasts, that they don't enjoy relationship podcasts or health podcasts or podcasts about their favorite author or whatever the case may be. If they're speaking to the same audience you're trying to reach, then see how you can support each other rather than just walking in and saying, I think I should be on your show. That's pretty arrogant of you to say, I'd be a perfect guest for your show, because you have no idea why I have people on my show in the first place.
And doing that homework to say, acknowledge the fact that like this might seem like a stretch, yet we talk to the same people. And here's the conversation that we could have that in my mind, at least, fits within the framework. And I'm certainly open to having a conversation with you to see what we could figure out together.
Yeah, I think it opens so many more doors for you. Tell
Yes.
tell me about a time where your podcast really opened a big opportunity for you.
So what year is this? I think it was last year, 2025. I work out with a woman who works in finance. I live in New York City. Almost everybody works in finance. I used to work in hedge funds. Um, she was on the planning committee for a conference of investment professionals, and they were looking for a speaker. And she reached out to me and said, I mentioned your show to the rest of the committee. Would you be open to coming and doing, a talk at our conference, being the one sort of off topic, non-investment strategy, talk at this conference? And I said, absolutely, 1,000% I'm in, yes, I do this. And, here's what we could do. And that was before I launched the book. That was before, I mean, I had been working with clients for a long time, but the public piece of what I do at that time was really the show and social media. And even the social media is designed to just sort of reinforce the brand. It's not necessarily, a lot of the other things. And so it's opened tremendous doors to opportunities beyond what I think a lot of coaches sometimes think it's going to look like working as a coach.
Yeah, that's interesting because we talked about finding audiences that might not be in lockstep with your topic, but are the same people you're trying to reach. And this finance conference is
Yep.
a perfect example of that. And here's an opportunity for you to come in and talk to a group of people who might not necessarily be um, in your the topic of the conference isn't in lockstep with your show, but the people that are in the conference definitely would be interested in your show. What did that do coming out of that conference? How did that affect the business, the podcast, the show, your email list?
Sure, it grows all of it. And part of what I did too, speaking of email list and all these other things, I mean, I at live events, I also do this on my podcast. I do text opt ins. So my ads typically use a text to get the link and the
What
coupon code
platform do you
instead of
use for that?
I've used a couple different over the years. Right now I'm using Textify. There's
Textify.
another
Okay.
one called Morse Connect. Um, but I've been using Textify for the last year and a half or so.
Okay.
And by the way, a lot of the email platforms now offer text options. So,
Nice.
you can integrate it that way too. So at the live events, whether it's a live podcast recording that I've done or a book talk or this speaking engagement, I give them, I close with a call to action where they text, you know, a different word or a different number depending on what they're looking for. And the thing I like about the Textify is that it'll go back and forth. So it'll capture their email, not just their phone number.
Oh, nice.
Um, and then that's how I send them whatever the opt-in is that they are looking for. And so it allows us to grow that email list, to stay in touch with those people. And sure, you're always going to have the people who then later, unsubscribe or don't tune in or whatever it is, but you never know. It's that
Right.
person, like everybody is lurking. It's about being there at the moment that they're in that mind frame to say, I need to do something. I need to take that next step.
What's been your biggest challenge growing your authority as you've coached for a dozen years prior to launching the podcast, and now you're into the podcast here for half a dozen years and things have been kind of rolling? What's been the biggest challenge?
It's it's the challenge and the frustration with the space in general. Like, I think for so many of us, and I have this too, like, I want my voice to be louder. I want people to hear my voice in the same way that they're hearing some of these people on social media and some of these people on other podcasts. And feel free to cut this. I'm going to sort of like, this is a little bit of a soapbox thing because one of the other things that's super frustrating to me is when other people start to step into this space and then try to read the label from inside the jar. So, case in point, I love Kara Swisher. I think she is whip smart, a brilliant interviewer. Like, I love listening to her podcasts. She has now launched she did a documentary that's picked up by CNN called Kara Swisher Wants to Live Forever. And now on her podcast, she has had some conversations where they're very much talking about my space and my category of wellness and lifestyle and all of these things. And I am listening and finding myself screaming into the abyss, that it's so interesting because I'm like, I am on overdrive as to what I want to say. So on the one hand, there's pieces of the conversation where they are talking about how supplements are bullshit, which I work with supplements. I'm sorry, I will say that again. Supplements are crap and don't work and aren't worth the money. I work with supplements. Some are, some aren't. And then it cuts to commercial and she's doing commercials for Groons and some of these other things that she just said in the content of the episode that she doesn't actually believe in, but now in the ad, she's saying how much she loves it. So, uh, you know, square,
Contradicting.
right. Then in the content of the episode and the people that she's interviewing, I appreciate, yes, there are a lot of grifters in this space. I talk a lot about how, a lot of interviews these days, we're talking about how, the tech bros and the billionaires are not your health guru. And there is a very big difference between individual health and public health, as we look at what's happening around us. But the other side of that is that there is research in some of these things. There's also not research on certain foods or nutrients because Where's the money in that? And I believe that not acknowledging that is part of the problem. And so as I'm listening to this episode and she's talking to another journalist or a couple other journalists and a doctor, you're still within the same system talking about the piece that's broken and the things that you guys within that framework think are the answers. And so it was just really frustrating to me. So coming back to your actual question, pardon my soapbox, coming back to your question of like the biggest challenge is how crowded and how loud some of these existing voices are. And it becomes a function of, in this space, getting to the point where I can even get a word in or with the same people that are listening to these others because their social media following is bigger or their name is bigger or they've done other things or they have different publicity or things like that. So
how do you fight
yeah.
that? How do you overcome that?
Well, the book was a big piece of it for me. And I keep doing what I'm doing. And I don't believe that changing who I am and my approach is the answer. So I keep doing what I do, helping the people who are resonating with me and ready to do something about it. And I am working, like I have a media coach and I'm working on some other articles and some other writing pieces and things that can help with some of that greater visibility. And
So you
yeah,
released Uncomplicating Wellness, the book,
yes,
back in October of 25. So
yes.
you mentioned that has helped. How does the book and the podcast work together to build your authority and grow your business?
Not everybody is a listener and not
Mm.
everybody is a reader. So it allows us to reach audiences in their preferred format. And then people can cross over. People might say, wait a minute, I want to learn more about that thing. Where could I do that? Wait a minute, I've been listening, but I could really use a reference that I could see and sort of come back to over and over. And so there are new audiences, there are overlapping audiences. It all just gives people different entry points to come into the ecosystem of what I do and what I offer and what's available to them.
Are you also using video as part of that?
So, video of my podcast is interview episodes only. I'll say more about that in a second, but interview episodes only, and they are part of my membership. So
Oh,
they are
wow.
behind a paywall.
Okay.
So half of my full-length episodes are interviews, half of my full-length episodes are what I call like my content or things that I talk about with my clients or topics that I want to cover. And on those, I have somebody join me. Sometimes it's a friend, sometimes it's a family member, sometimes it's a client, sometimes it's a podcast listener. And those I do not do video. I record the video, but I don't publish that video. So
Got
we
it.
use a clip of my video of all episodes. We use a clip of my video or the interviewee's video for promotion, but publishing the episode in full video is interview episodes only and behind the paywall.
Nice.
And
Nice.
that's a strategic choice more because I am willing to ask friends, family, clients, and listeners to put their voice and their first name out there. Like, to me, that's a different ask than saying, hey, will you put your face on the internet for this conversation for me? Like
Right.
people, I do believe that people are generally kind and the internet can find all of the unkind people. And
Yes.
so that's not an ask that I'm willing to make. Now, I could put just my video on there, but I just think that's not compelling content. And so we don't need that. We can listen to those. We can do the interview ones, in full video. and call it a day.
If you were to give one tip, like one little piece of secret sauce to building influence and authority when it comes to a business, what would that be?
Integrity. I believe that not just as a differentiator, but as a point of trust to build that audience and build that authority is the integrity of this is a fit, this is not a fit. This is the guest that adds value that I am inherently endorsing by offering them my platform. This one is not. This is a brand that I will partner with. This is not. This is the way that I talk about things. That is not. I live the life that I also recommend. So the other interesting piece of that integrity is to say, I am my own walking billboard for what the outcomes are that somebody could expect working with me.
That's a great point of bringing on guests and letting people borrow your stage strategically and not just anybody, not just because you want to have a great conversation with somebody, but because it serves a purpose for your listeners, for your business, for your journey, and that you're bringing them on for a reason. And it's a
Yes,
strategic reason. And it's not just willy-nilly, let's just draw a name out of a hat, or I need an interview this week, so let's invite my friend Bob on. Like there's
exactly.
actually a
And there are
legit reason.
times, yes, and there are times where I'm pitching a show and they say, would you do a swap? Okay, now we have to talk about what that might look like. And there are times where I have to sort of pull things out of that person or frame it in a way that ends up aligned. But that's my job as the host, as the reason why these people are continuing to show up every week, especially if there are sometimes guests, sometimes not guests, different guests every single week. The continuous thing that people continue to show up for is you. And so I believe it's the integrity piece. And then if I can add one more, it's the content. Over and over and over, when people come to me with challenges with their show, or, why isn't it growing? Why aren't listeners staying? What's happening? And it tends to be a content piece. It tends to be, are you, why are we doing this? Who are we serving? If the objective was to have these conversations because you enjoy them, amazing. Then who cares who's listening? If the goal was because you enjoy it, tick the box and move on. If your goal was authority, influence, growing a business, generating other streams of income, then we have to think about some of these other pieces too.
Yeah, absolutely. And that goes back to pitching. The reason
Yeah.
I bring people on this show is because they've used their platform to grow their authority. And I get so many pitches of, hey, Bob's great at talking about how to use AI to grow your business. And well, that's not what this show is all about. And
Right.
so I can bring on a fantastic host of salad with a side of fries, and talk about the health and wellness space without really talking about the health and wellness space. I mean, you have a fantastic book, you have a fantastic show, but how do we use that to grow your influence in the space? How do we get your voice to be not necessarily louder than all the rest, but how do we get it to be more interesting, more engaging, and more influential than all the
Yes.
rest? And
Well, and I
and
think
that's
you
it.
bring up I think you bring up a really interesting point there. And two things are popping to mind. One is that the number of listeners isn't everything. The number of downloads isn't everything. And especially in the podcast space with the traditional podcast CPM monetization model, it doesn't give the value of the engaged audience that makes the difference when you're growing authority, when you're building a business. And so I think people can end up distracted and blinded by some of those numbers and some of that data. And then the other thing that when you talk about the book and the podcast and all of these things to grow authority, I still do a ton of in-person networking and referrals. And all of these pieces, the book, the podcast, whatever it is, I teach people how to use that to make an introduction to me. So I tell people, if you're listening to an episode, first of all, thank you. And who did it make you think of? Send them that episode and say, heard this and thought of you. By the way, I know her if you want an introduction. People are telling me that they are buying my book as a gift for people, like even as a host gift. Like if you're going to someone's house, because it's so offensive, right? Like it's a gentle, book that is easily giftable, and what a difference it's making for people. And that's another way of saying, thought you would love this. By the way, I know the author if you want an introduction or if you have follow-up questions or whatever it is. And so using the tools of the content you're creating in your day-to-day life as you're going about the business building activities that you already do.
I would love to connect people to you. How might they get connected, whether it's to talk about health and wellness like you do on your show, or talking about reaching the same audience that you reach? How might they do that?
Absolutely. So free gift for everybody listening, a complimentary discovery call, whether you want to talk about business or your health and wellness, whatever it is. So 30 minutes, you and me. I normally do 15. So 30 minutes for your listeners. So you have the link for that. My website is asaladwithasideoffries.com. All social media, I'm at Jenn Trepeck, JENNTREPECK.
Fantastic. And I'll put the link if you want that one-on-one call with Jenn. You can find that at podcasttalentcoach.com/salad for a salad with a side of fries. Jenn, what's next? What's next down the road? You've done the awards are stacking up. There's the big things are next. What would that be?
I'm working on a lot more of those speaking engagements and the mainstream media, if you will. So, TV, newspapers, some of that kind of stuff. Morning shows is the next goal.
That's awesome. Well, I wish you nothing but the best. Thanks for taking time with us today. Thanks for sharing a little bit of your journey, and I look forward to doing it again soon.
Erik, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
I told you she was amazing. She shared so many great nuggets. I hope you jotted a few of those down. You can get Jenn's free curiosity call at podcasttalentcoach.com/salad. That's short for salad with a side of fries, her great podcast. You can find that call at podcasttalentcoach.com/salad. She'll help you walk through any business or career challenges you might be facing and help you find a plan to get out of that. Head over there and connect with her. Big thanks to Jenn Trepeck for being on the show today. Make sure you check out her podcast too, Salad with a Side of Fries. You're putting content out every week, but your podcast just isn't doing anything to generate those leads or build your authority or bring in the clients that you want. And I understand. I struggled for a long time. When I first created Podcast Talent Coach, I too leaned into creating a lot of content that showed people how to build a better podcast. And it brought me very few clients. And it wasn't until I changed and focused on my authority and my personality and really leaning into my story. Because you don't have a content problem. You have plenty of content. It's a connection problem that you're having. That's exactly what we uncover inside the Podcast Authority Audit. The Podcast Authority Audit is where I sit down and I go through your entire podcast and audit it for you. And then you and I sit down and have a conversation to discuss what I've discovered. I break down your show, your messaging, your positioning, your show notes, the whole thing. And I show you exactly where your authority is leaking and how to fix it, which is the most important part. Your podcast stops sounding like everyone else and it starts becoming a category of one. It starts becoming the reason people choose you. Now, it's not a free audit. It's not some sales call in disguise. You're paying for my coaching. I'm going through an entire episode with a fine-tooth comb and giving you a plan to build your authority in your space so you can start attracting your ideal clients. You can find out all about it and apply today over at podcasttalentcoach.com/audit. Now, I can't take everybody because my calendar can only hold so many audits because it takes a lot of time. I got to listen to your episode, take a bunch of notes, show you exactly where your authority's leaking within the show, look over your show notes, your marketing, the whole 9 yards. And then you and I get on a call and we go through it all. So it's a lot of time invested in it, which is why it's not free and which is why I can only take a few clients at a time. But if you are interested and you're serious about improving your show and serious about growing your business and attracting clients, then you and I should talk. If not, no worries. Keep listening to the podcast and enjoy yourself. But if you're serious and you want to make some changes, go to podcasttalentcoach.com/audit. You and I will turn your podcast into your most powerful authority building asset. Get over there and check it out at podcasttalentcoach.com/audit. On next week's episode, we're going to be joined by branding expert Jerry Foster. Jerry is fantastic. He's going to show you the difference between being respected and being strongly positioned and sought after in your niche. And more importantly, he's going to show you exactly what to do about it and how to create that personal brand in the space. It's an amazing conversation. I'm going to have that with Jerry Foster next week. Until then, step into your authority, and we'll see you next time.